What really excited me in terms of what Mintus was putting forward, it wasn't just this notion of looking at, a major Picasso, Warhol, whatever it might be, and putting it onto the platform and ultimately allowing that to be, bought and shared. There's also different aspects which really excited me about primary artists working on a platform like this.
We're joined in the room by the world famous Brett Gorvy.
Thank you.
Normally he'd be wearing his Bare Facts hat, but he'd like everybody to be able to see him. And coming live to us from London is Tamer Ozmen, the CEO of Mintus. As the room is populated, just a few ground rules that this is live, so hopefully we'll have a little drama here, but the question and answers were submitted in advance from the audience. So those are the questions we'll be working from. So we will not be taking any sort of unexpected questions from this, but a number of you did submit them, and we'll get to as many as we think that's reasonable. So we're going to start off by talking for a little bit the view from above of what is Mintus?
So Mintus is an investment platform. We make art an investable asset class by removing a lot of limitations that exist today, such as origination, exit, valuation, and storage, insurance. So we take all the operational and also origination and exit complications out of the process for investors to be able to buy shares of paintings through the platform. We're not an NFT platform. We're not a tokenized platform. We are a regulated platform where everything is followed by the Financial Conduct Authority rules in the United Kingdom, and also we have the Reg D approval in the United States for the accredited investors.
Now, we first met maybe 18 months ago, and then a while back I heard Brett Gorvy was on the team, and I went, ding, okay, now what's going on? This is like a game changer in my mind in the world of this. Brett, how did you come to be involved? What's your role? And
so first of all, I was introduced to this team actually by Tad Smith, former CEO at Sotheby's. And actually this happened right at the beginning of COVID, or right in the midst of COVID while we were locked down. And I started having regular conversations with Tamer, and we very quickly understood the potential of this, both in terms of ultimately the technology that he had, and then really how the world was adapting, or how we saw the world was adapting to this new idea of parceling out, or at least sharing out paintings into a much more democratic way.
And your title is?
I'm a curator.
You're a curator.
Yeah,
so you're not an art dealer anymore. You're back.
I like being a curator. Yeah.
But you used to be an art critic, didn't you?
It's in my my CV somewhere. Yeah.
Now, before we take a little deeper dive into Mintus, I think we have this opportunity with Brett here to get a little bit of a quick taste of what's going on in the art market in general, and then we can go from there to what's that mean in terms of this platform.
Right. Well, I think what I was most interested back in when we first started talking in 2020 was ultimately we were in lockdown. The world had literally closed down, and specifically the art fairs had stopped, and the auctions were really much more a TV program versus necessarily something you could really participate in person. And so this idea, in a way, that one could access works of art, but also ultimately share in a greater way, fitted much more actually with that time where you really wanted to get out in the world. What we've seen since then is an extraordinary high in terms of the market, where we saw potential market disruption, specifically because of what was happening under COVID restrictions. Even in Asia, with the strongest restrictions, we saw phenomenal results. And the auction houses, in a way, have led this because they've had some of these major collections that we saw last season. Obviously, Paul Allen being, an incredible example of a collection coming in, getting the highest prices ever. So we are at a market in many ways at the height, or at a potential high. But at the same time, it's a market which has become, I'd say, even more complicated in the way that actions have been, or not actions, how people actually have had to understand it. And I think, as Tamer said, what Mintus actually provides is an access, but also an ability to ultimately participate in something which is very much the contemporary aspect of the world.
Now, where do you see it in terms of art as an investment? Clearly, this is an investment kind of platform.
Before I answer that question, I think something Brett said was so important. He was very kind that, we spent almost like a couple hours each week shaping the model together. So where it started and when, before Brett came in, and then during our conversations that the how model kind of shaped in such a way to protect the artist, protect the industry, protect the investor, protect the art. So from that point of view, his contributions was absolutely invaluable for us. So art as an investment is something that has not been open to most everybody. So not many people can buy a $5 million painting. Not many people can buy a $1 million painting. So as a result of that, you're pretty much priced out of the market. Even if you wanted to buy, if you have the money, if you don't get the right advice, it's very difficult to make the right decision on it. So with that, there are a lot of complications in getting into art and then making that as a right investment opportunity. So with that in mind, we start the company. But for an investor point of view, art provides two things to answer your question. Is one is quite uncorrelated. If you look at the data for the last 40 years, you can see pretty much that it doesn't follow the equities market. And then also it has anti-inflation hedging capabilities. When you look at like the 70s, when the inflation was very high, art, real estate, and gold were the only three assets that people were kind of running into. So from that point of view, due to its uncorrelated capabilities, anti-inflation capabilities, and also wealth preservation capabilities because of the scarcity, it's becoming I wouldn't say quickly, it's becoming a somewhat popular asset class for people to look into.
It's also one of the few truly global markets. Every market, you can say, even real estate has a regional sense. Art allows basically to break down most of these barriers in terms of geography as much as in terms of demographic.
Now, Brett, you talk about your role as curator, but in a sense, you're sort of involved in the sourcing of the actual art that Mintus is going to buy. How are you sourcing it? How are these decisions being made? What's your process involved in this?
Well, it's actually, to go back to what Tamer said, it's both in terms of the sourcing, but actually a lot of the concept of this and what really excited me in terms of what Mintus was putting forward. It wasn't just this notion of looking at, a major Picasso, Warhol, whatever it might be, and putting it onto the platform and ultimately allowing that to be bought and shared. There's also different aspects which really excited me about primary artists working on a platform like this, because at this time when we were first talking, actually the NFT was the the hot thing, and specifically this notion of retaining value, i.e. ultimately an artist could maintain within the NFT some sort of ownership of the work. And what Tamer showed ultimately by putting basically shares up of a work of art, you could retain a certain amount of that share.
You being the artist or the artist and their gallery.
Mainly the artist, actually, in this particular case. And that opened up, by the very notion of that, ultimately a new way of actually thinking about selling art, but also allowing artists to participate.
So rather than a smart contract, so to speak, going forward, there's an actual more traditional potential structure of ownership.
Well, if you think you put a work of art up on this platform, you have 100% shares to allocate, you hold back, say, a 10 or 15% for the artist, and that is there forever. But ultimately, while the work is obviously on the platform and trading. So that ability for the artist to not only have a different access, but also, different way of actually positioning their work into a marketplace, but ultimately that they have control.
So that's one of the fundamental unique selling points
I guess that's one of our biggest differentiators, the investment selection process. So when an artwork comes on the platform, first we run it through our AI tool to understand a bit better about that
Tell us
artwork.
more about the AI and the data analysis that you're doing.
Yeah, I'll do that. And then so basically we run it for the AI process first. And then after we do that, then we go get 3 different valuations from 3 independent valuers around the world. And then once the valuation and the AI platform kind of tells us this is good enough to take to the investment committee, then we take it to the investment committee under Brett's leadership. And then once the decision is made by them that this is actually a good artwork, then we bring exit experts into the equation and then find out how sellable this artwork is. So from that point of view, there is a lot of quantitative and qualitative information gets in there. And it's a process where there are quite a few different components are involved in it. So from that point of view, it's not a single point of decision. It's a process that goes through. Regarding the AI, it's in early days, and I know, Josh, you're a programmer, so you'll probably ask me a lot of questions on that. But what we do is quite unique. First of all, we get the data that's available to us through galleries, other platforms and everything else. We use these unsupervised learning techniques, meaning that it clusters the data around, different components. So, for example, we go to 1993, look at a painting, and then, what was the size of that painting? What was the price of that painting? And who was the artist? And then what was the auction results of that? Was there, underbidders? Was there, unsuccessful bids? Was there any type of extra marketing opportunities or around that painting? So we take that and then we look at all the paintings at the same size and the same price in that year that got sold in New York. And we compare that to Hong Kong, compare that to Venice or London, Paris, and what have you. And then we look at the economic metrics around those countries at the same time, like what were the economies doing at that same time. So take that for like 5 or 6 different components, and then multiply that with hundreds of permutations, and then kind of take that from 1993 to now. It try to gives us a price velocity of that artist. Is that artist going up? Is that artist kind of like staying steady, or is that artist going down? And then when you add the social listening on top of that, how popular this person is, and then what happened kind of behind the sales, then it gets very interesting. I mean, it's in the early days, but you can basically, take a painting, put the painting on, gives you kind of like a Wikipedia-like information about that painting. But at the same time, it gives you a bit of a journey of that artist and then where that painting will go.
I'm always interested in sort of the black box, and that there's stuff going on size, and different art companies are saying we have this thing, and I'm always a little bit like, what's going on in there? Brett, this is kind of mimicking what you and I do in our brain automatically every day, in a sense. Can this, or have you seen this to reveal things that you went, oh, I didn't think of that in terms of a Richter painting or this or that? What are you learning as one of these sort of like
Well, I think, look, any data information or, the capturing of data gives you, first of all, more accurate understanding of the situation. So while we have a lot of sort of understanding because we can read between the lines, actually, when you see the facts, and in many ways, this is as much for the investor. Obviously, from our point of view, we are already coming to it with a lot of knowledge, but actually, how do you allow someone to go onto this website or to go onto this tool and access for themselves?
So you're saying it's a language to the investors that they can understand a little bit, in a sense, as well as a language for you.
Yeah, if you think how much ArtNet, for instance, as a resource has helped the whole industry as a way of understanding prices. And obviously you then have to analyze that information, but basically you have access to every auction.
How many years since you left Christie's?
So I left in 2016.
2000. So in that period, Sotheby's would say they're a data company now.
Mhm.
When you were there, did you see Christie's as a data company?
No. We were using data, but not necessarily
And now
like that.
they're much more data companies, wouldn't
Right.
you say? So this is generic to the industry in a sense, too, of like,
Well, I think technology basically has improved every aspect of what we're doing, and I think COVID, in a way, has pushed it even further to how people are actually using it or applying it.
And I think, Josh, on that one, interesting point is that we're not building this to sell this. We're not building it to kind of make money as a software as a service from this. We're building it to make the right, preparation and right decisions for the investors if we're making an investment into the right painting. So that's a bit of a difference. And then we will, of course, share it with our data providers. And then when it's become, by the way, all the AI systems are as good as the data that they're in. So we're in the beginnings of this journey. When that becomes, available, then we'll make it available to everybody else in the industry. So from that point of view, it's a quite a unique tool to have in that sense.
so before we go to some of the questions, a little bit more of the logistics of the sort of the target points of the art you're buying and the investment material and the regulations and the logistics. Can you summarize some of those points to people who are new to this?
Sure. I mean, we go $1.5 million and above paintings because if you go 1.5 million below, the volatility goes up. But we also look at baskets, so we can take 10 paintings at $100,000 each, or 5 paintings at $200,000 each, and then put them into a basket. So you can actually go into thematic investments and then go into various categories with that. Some of them might be more speculative, some of them might be different genres and what have you. So from that point of view, we have the capability of going with 5 million and above, 1 million and above, or make a basket of various things where the investors can choose from. That's the I guess on the price point. On the regulation,
Just to interrupt you there, I think one of the things which again was exciting for me about this platform and how it differentiated from other competitors was this notion that you could actually put a collection onto the platform. It wasn't about just an individual work of art. You ultimately, as with an auction house, which gets you very excited when a whole collection comes for sale, you could do the same thing here for an investor.
And investment levels so
investment levels are $3,000 if you buy it through the website. If you go to mintus.com and go through the process, it's $3,000. Or you can come into one of our vehicles through your private bank. And if you come through one of your through your private bank, the minimum investment is $100,000. When you come through your private bank, we make the investments into across the portfolio. When you come to the website, you have to go directly into each painting. I mean, you can you can buy multiple paintings and shares of multiple paintings, but the process is a little different on each section.
And my last point on this is is it limited geographically to who can invest?
Now, anybody from anywhere in the world can come and participate. Where we market is dependent on the regulatory approvals that we have. But anybody that hears about Mintus from anywhere in the world can come and purchase shares of the paintings.
Okay, so the first question that came in is kind of like an obvious question, but a relevant question. You alluded to before, the differentiation between what you do in Masterpiece.
Masterworks.
Works that's fine masterpieces.
So
there's probably some of you listening from Masterworks here, I would guess.
Brett, you want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first. I think you're.
Yeah. So I mean, look, we respect Masterworks. I mean, first of all, they're doing a great job educating the market, and this is a new market. So from that point of view, having very serious players like them is a very good thing, I believe. And the main differences between us is that we go to different customer bases. We don't go after mass retail clients. We go only after qualified, accredited, or institutional clients. So that's one difference. The other one is that we do a different selection and valuation process, I believe, than they do. And then we have some differences on the fee structures and what have you. So when you put us together, like on the top line, we look very similar, but when it goes to the different details, we're quite different models actually from one another.
But that notion also of a singular work of art versus ultimately a collection or a basket, as Tamer has heard, is something which is unique to this site.
Now, a related question that came as exit strategy of that is, what is that? And is that different than other companies too? Is there an exit strategy that's generally there?
Are you talking about exit strategy for Mintus or exit strategy for the paintings?
Right. Hopefully, I would think now in 2023, the exit strategies are different. They're like build a profitable company rather than build a company with no revenue, no profit, and sell it for $1 billion. So I would think the exit strategy for work for the punter when they get paid and
right.
I mean, you actually would be surprised, Josh, because of the technology and because of the difference that we make. We get a lot of interest from a lot of different investment groups. But on the exit, we would exit through either private sales or through auctions. So those would be the two way that we would exit the paintings. So we have a overall 7-year hold on the paintings, but we try to exit them by the year 4 and 5. So that also kind of goes back to your earlier question. The value of the painting becomes very important, here. The more expensive the paintings are, they're more difficult to exit. When you're at the $1 to $2 million category, there are more, potential buyers in that area. So we try to balance the both on the speculative artworks, 1.1 million above and then the 5 million level.
But as you said earlier, when we're even looking at a work of art, we're looking through the whole journey of that, meaning we look at potential now in terms of what is value, but also ultimately what a 2 to 3 year or 4 year window will look like in terms of both upside potential, but also, as you pointed out, what is the best exit.
Do you think that with more artist investment, there's potential headwinds from government scrutiny? That was a question going on with art as being more in the news as an investment structure. Certainly, maybe in NFT world, they're going to be that crypto ways, but is that something to factor in? Do you feel the government's going to start to look into this area more in terms of regulations and oversight?
I mean, from the platform's point of view, as you said, there are regulated players like ourselves and Masterworks, and then there are quite a lot of unregulated platforms, mostly around tokenization and NFTs and what have you. So there could be some enforcement in that area. But as an industry, I don't see much changing. For example, the only change that I noticed in last year in the UK, they introduced this concept called AMP, Art Market Participant, by HMRC. So that requires that you have to know the ownership history of the artwork, which was not related to us, but it's something that we follow and we think it's a good thing to have. And from that point of view, we went through a very, very detailed journey before we get regulated. So we have to be very transparent with our fees, with our selection process, with our exit process, how we keep the paintings, how we insure them, and what have you. And the regulators went into an incredible level of detail of how the model works. So that was actually a good thing that makes it very good for the investor in a way.
Now, in general, Brett, I would ask you LGDR. Did I get that right?
Okay.
And in the previous firm, Gorvy had galleries across many countries, and KYC, or know your client, became a very big issue over the last few years. To what extent in general has that been something you've had to deal with, and do you see more of that going forward? And is it different in the States than in Europe than in Asia?
Well, first of all, I'd say
where you have branches.
Yeah.
Each.
No, look, I think every country has its own, regulations and ways and practices. But overall, I think this is something which Mintus benefits from. I mean, regulation allows for, good regulation allows for, first of all, comfort. So no different, know your client is basically you want to see who you're buying and who you're selling from. And that is actually a good thing to have. So ultimately, you don't want to be restrained by these things, or you don't want to have something which ultimately becomes such that stops business in that sense. But in most cases, these are actually very sensible ideas.
I would say just in one general point, I often read the art world's unregulated, and that's just not true.
No.
There's millions of regulations for doing business. It's just there are the Inigo Philbricks of the world that can get around all that.
But what I find so exciting about what Mintus is doing is ultimately it is allowing for art to be sold with incredible regulation. With all of the things that Tamer has been talking about, ultimately these are really the securities, or at least the safety nets for investors.
Now we had another question: can the art that you have not only be in a warehouse, but can it go to homes of any of the investors?
I think against the homes, I think this is probably a little too much. But one of the things that I got very excited by when we first started our conversations, and actually, where does the art live? And one of the ideas that we were putting forward was to almost have an artist museum, because if you think, what we said earlier, by encouraging artists to use this platform and to retain value in their works, and to actually, in some ways, you obviously you hope that is in tandem with their dealers, but in some cases it's actually, as an alternative to many of their relationships currently. But the notion of the art being in a place where people could see it and not being in a warehouse was something which we were excited by, and actually creating a space where people can come and visit the art that they have a share of.
In a related way, for those of you who've been following the Baer Facts for a while, we've leaned into a group called Archive, which is basically building a community-based museum where the community owns and can show that. And I encourage you to, if you haven't investigated them, that they're really a more disruptive, in a good way, kind of way of looking to hold artworks and other objects. So just an aside that it's a similar kind of thought process.
I like your term disruptive, because in many ways, all of this is disrupting the status quo. And I think that is what creates change, but also creates, new ideas and innovation.
So I want to sort of wind this up by saying, Tamer, what's the plan for 2023? It's March, and where do you see yourself being and by the end of the year?
So we're bringing $76 million worth of inventory onto the platform this year. And still 95% of our investors never bought art before. So we're in a way enlarging the community. When I mentioned that number to you last year at Art Basel, you were not happy with that number, Josh. You thought it should be 99%, but it's still 95%. We think is a pretty good number to have from that point of view. This is the first time they're actually entering into that market. And then if you look at the average investment size, which is, it's a pretty good level, it averages around $11,000 per client, although our minimum is at $3,000. So with that, the plans are to, go out with those $76 million of paintings, just continue to improve our offerings, and then, start returning some investment back to the investors. So that's the goal for 2023.
Any last remarks from either of you before I?
No, as I say, I find this both of, this is exciting because it's evolving. We're not talking about something which is static. And I think even the notion of, I mean, I'm going to be in Hong Kong in 10 days time, and I believe, Tamer, you're coming out as well. This is also exciting to new markets, both in terms of this idea of something which is ultimately a different way of investing, but also a different way of actually accessing.
Traditionally, we've been fighting over the pie. And now a lot of these things are saying, let's make the pie bigger. So it's trying to get to the outer ring of it without giving up the center. And clearly, having been to Asia recently, going back, I'll see you there, at Hot Pot or something like that, that the demand there for more people, both inside the pie and outside the pie, is happening. So that's what I'm looking forward to. And again, what's differentiating this product a little bit and to really look for it is the relationship with the artist, and that they're a partner in this process. I think for me, it's like, okay, that's interesting. So I think for our audience, thank you for spending the time here. We will have this on our website fairly soon to go back to. You might want to look back in a year and go, well, how did this is now, that was then. And thank you. And we look forward to seeing both of you and hearing how you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, world.